The wedding bells of Hartford were meant to sound like joy, but on that freezing morning of 1841, they rang like a warning only the murderer understood. Hartford woke before dawn, wrapped in cold winter air. Snow clung to every rooftop, chimneys pushed out thick, dark smoke. People whispered excitedly in the streets about the wedding everyone had waited for. Yet beneath that excitement, the air felt tight and uneasy, as if the town sensed something terrible approaching. The Harrington estate stood at the end of the main road like a stone giant. Its tall windows glowed with lantern light that flickered like restless eyes. Servants rushed through its long hallways carrying flowers, linens, trays, and ribbons. Their footsteps echoed sharply through the house, sounding more nervous than busy. Upstairs, Eleanor Whitford sat silently in the guest chamber. Her wedding dress flowed around her in soft white silk. Her fingers trembled, and she hid them under the fabric. She wasn't afraid of marriage. She wasn't afraid of Jonathan. Her fear had only one face: Margaret Harrington, her soon-to-be mother-in-law. Margaret opposed the marriage from the beginning. She said Eleanor wasn't refined enough. She said she wasn't Harrington material. She never missed a chance to make Eleanor feel unwelcome. Today, that silent cruelty hung heavier than ever. The maid tightened the laces of Eleanor's gown. Eleanor stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman in the glass looked ready for joy, but her eyes betrayed her. They held fear, quiet fear, fear that pressed against her chest like a cold hand. She whispered a small prayer for peace, though even she did not believe in it. Downstairs, Jonathan Harrington paced across the marble floor, nervous, adjusting his coat every few seconds. He was gentle, sincere, and painfully trusting. He believed love could melt even his mother's icy resolve. He believed this wedding would bring unity. He believed Margaret would finally accept Eleanor. He believed wrong. Margaret watched him from the staircase, unmoving. Her hands rested on the railing. Her eyes followed every step he took, not with affection, but with possession, a sharp, hungry kind of ownership that made servants look away. She would not lose her son, not to Eleanor, not to anyone. Outside, carriages rolled in one by one, wheels cracking through the snow. Guests stepped out in velvet coats and heavy fur wraps. They carried gifts tied with ribbons. They greeted one another with bright smiles. They brought blessings and laughter. What they did not bring was suspicion. None imagined the bride would not live past nightfall. In her chamber, Eleanor felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. Her chest tightened. Her breath faltered. Something felt wrong. Deeply, terribly wrong. She whispered, "Something is coming." But no voice answered, no ear heard her. The warning bells had already rung. To get next of this chilling series, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Every wedding has secrets behind the smiles, but in the Harrington estate, those secrets didn't hide. They stalked. The morning continued, tightening its grip on the house, not with celebration, but with a stillness that felt alive, a stillness that watched every movement. Eleanor stepped into the hallway, her gown whispering against the wooden floor. The lamps burned low along the walls, casting long, trembling shadows, shadows that seemed to stretch toward her, reaching, following, waiting. She inhaled slowly, trying to steady herself, trying to believe today would end in love, not fear. But the house felt colder than before, as if it already knew the fate she didn't. Jonathan appeared at the far end of the corridor. His face brightened the moment he saw her. He walked quickly, almost breathlessly, as though her presence alone warmed the air. He took her hands. She felt him, warm, hopeful, unaware. His love was real. His trust was real. His blindness was real. "I promise today will be perfect," he whispered. Her heart wished he was right. Her bones told her otherwise. Margaret turned the corner just then, her footsteps silent, too controlled. Her eyes locked onto Eleanor with a chill that pierced through the silken skin. Her smile rose slowly, but nothing kind lived behind it. Not warmth, not acceptance, not forgiveness. Just calculation, just possession, just something colder than the winter outside. Jonathan didn't notice. He never noticed. That was the tragedy he carried without knowing. The preparation for the ceremony began. Servants moved around the great hall, adjusting chairs, placing white roses, lighting candles. Yet every action seemed strained, every smile forced, every whisper cut short when Margaret walked past. She carried an authority that bruised the air. People stepped aside instinctively, as if brushing against her would stain them. Eleanor watched her from across the room, the way she inspected the food, the way she examined every drink, every ornament, every detail. It wasn't the behavior of a protective mother. It was the behavior of someone with a plan, someone who needed everything controlled, perfect, predictable, fatal. The minister arrived, offering blessings to the family. Margaret smiled politely. She didn't mean it. The minister didn't notice. Few ever did. Outside the windows, the sky grew darker. Clouds crawled in, swallowing the morning light. Snow drifted harder, tapping against the glass like nervous fingers. Guests gathered in small clusters, laughing, sharing stories, unaware of the storm forming inside the house. A storm not of weather, but of intent. In the hallway leading to the dining room, Eleanor paused. She felt the cold again, that same heavy cold from earlier, a warning crawling up her throat, a whisper telling her to run, a whisper telling her she would not leave this house alive if she stayed. She turned slowly and saw Margaret standing at the far end of the hall, watching, silent, eyes unreadable, hands folded, still as a statue carved from quiet hatred. Eleanor tried to breathe, but something in Margaret's stare made the air too sharp to swallow. The wedding had not begun, but the danger had. To continue this chilling story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for next. Everyone thought the danger was outside the Harrington estate, but the real threat was already inside, smiling, watching, waiting for the moment the bride would take her last breath. The wedding hall filled slowly as the morning light crept through tall windows. Guests gathered near the long tables, admiring the decorations and whispering about the grand ceremony. No one sensed the tension hiding under the beauty. No one noticed Margaret Harrington gliding through the room like a shadow in silk. Eleanor stepped inside the hall, her gown glowing softly under the lantern light. Conversations paused. Guests turned. Some smiled, some admired. But Margaret's expression didn't move, not even an inch. Her eyes scanned Eleanor the way a predator studies the last breath of its prey. Jonathan rushed to Eleanor's side. He took her hand gently, his face warm with pride. He whispered that she looked beautiful. He whispered that everything would be perfect. Eleanor forced a smile. She wished she could believe him, but her spine felt cold, like hands tightening around it. Margaret approached slowly, her footsteps soft, her eyes sharp. She carried a small velvet box in her hands, a gift, a wedding token, a symbol of family acceptance. Or so everyone thought. She stopped in front of Eleanor, raising the box with a polite smile. A smile that felt too smooth, too rehearsed, too dangerous. She said it belonged to Jonathan's grandmother. She said it was tradition. She said Eleanor should wear it today to honor the family. Eleanor lifted the lid. Inside lay a delicate necklace. Gold. Thin. Beautiful. The kind of jewelry designed to rest close to the skin, close to the pulse, close to the heart. Jonathan smiled, encouraging her to put it on. The guests leaned in, waiting, watching. Eleanor hesitated. A whisper inside her lungs begged her to refuse, begged her to step away. But she silenced it. She did not want to insult Margaret. Not now, not in front of everyone. Margaret came forward and helped fasten the necklace herself, her fingers cold as they brushed Eleanor's skin. Cold like something dead, cold like the breath of a grave. Eleanor swallowed. A strange dizziness fluttered in her chest for a moment. She ignored it. She told herself it was nerves. She told herself the room was too warm. She told herself everything was fine. Margaret stepped back, her smile thin, satisfied, almost triumphant. No one noticed. No one noticed. Only Eleanor felt a small sting beneath the necklace. A sharp prick, too quick to understand, too quick to fear. The ceremony music began. Guests hurried to take their seats. Jonathan squeezed Eleanor's hand. Eleanor tried to breathe normally, but the sting on her neck pulsed again. A slow burn, a quiet warning, a sign that something inside her had already begun to change. The wedding had begun, but beneath the music and smiles, something poisonous moved quietly, waiting for the moment to strike. The ceremony took place inside the grand Harrington Hall. Candles flickered along the walls, shadows swayed across marble floors, and every guest wore the same warm smile, unaware that death was already inside the room. Eleanor walked down the aisle with a slow, steady breath. She looked beautiful, but pale. Almost too pale. The weight on her chest hadn't left. The feeling of danger hovered around her like a cold fog. Jonathan watched her with soft, hopeful eyes. He saw only beauty. He saw only love. He didn't see fear. He didn't see the way her hands trembled. He didn't see that the woman he adored sensed danger he could not imagine. Margaret stood beside the front row, still as a statue, her expression unreadable, her eyes locked on Eleanor's every step, not with admiration, not with motherly pride, but with calculation, the kind that hides behind perfect posture and polite smiles. The priest began the vows. His voice echoed through the hall, steady, calm, sacred. But Eleanor felt none of it. Her heartbeat thrashed in her ears. Something was wrong. Something was closing in, and every instinct inside her screamed to run. As she repeated her vows, her gaze drifted toward Margaret, just for a moment, just long enough to see a strange softness in the woman's eyes. A softness that didn't look like approval. It looked like victory. Quiet. Chilling. Final. Eleanor's throat went dry. Her voice cracked as she finished her words. A subtle tremble ran through her shoulders. Jonathan gently squeezed her hands. She forced a smile, a fragile one, held together only by hope. The rings were exchanged. The priest lifted his hands, declared them husband and wife. Applause filled the room like warm thunder, but beneath that sound, Eleanor swore she heard something else. A whisper, a warning, or maybe just her own panic echoing in her bones. Margaret stepped forward. She placed a soft kiss on Eleanor's cheek. Her gloves were cold, far colder than they should have been in a warm hall. Margaret's voice brushed Eleanor's ear like a winter breath. "Welcome to the family, my dear." The words crawled under Eleanor's skin. They didn't sound like acceptance. They sounded like a sentence, a quiet promise, one only she could hear. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, thick, heavy, silent. The town celebrated what they believed was a beautiful union. But inside the Harrington estate, the real celebration, the dark one, had only just begun. Eleanor didn't know it yet, but the most dangerous part of her wedding wasn't the ceremony. It was what waited for her at the feast. If you want next, and the story's next chilling twist, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. She lifted the cup with shaking fingers, but she didn't know it wasn't tea she was drinking. It was the beginning of her death. The music in the Harrington ballroom softened into a gentle waltz. Guests drifted across the polished floor. Laughter floated like warm smoke through the air. But under the chandelier's light, Eleanor felt the walls tightening around her. The unease in her chest had grown into something heavy, something she could no longer ignore. She stepped away from the crowd for a moment, her breath uneven, her pulse sharp. She reached for a glass of water on a nearby table. Her hand froze before touching it. A strange instinct held her back. A small whisper inside her mind said, "Not that one." Before she could move, Margaret Harrington appeared beside her, calm, silent, smiling with a sweetness that hid sharpened teeth. "My dear," Margaret said softly, "you look pale. You must drink something. A bride shouldn't faint on her wedding night." Eleanor tried to smile, tried to act strong, but Margaret's presence drained the warmth from her bones. Still, refusing her would create chaos, and she knew it. Margaret lifted a porcelain teacup from a silver tray. Steam curled upward, carrying a faint herbal scent. A scent Eleanor didn't recognize. A scent that didn't belong to anything served earlier that evening. Eleanor hesitated. Just a heartbeat. Just one breath too long. Margaret noticed. "It's chamomile," she said. "Good for nerves. It will help you feel better." The slight pause before the last word made Eleanor's stomach twist. Jonathan approached from across the room, his smile bright, his voice carrying through the crowd. But Margaret stepped between them, blocking his view, her voice low, cutting. "Your bride needs a moment. Let her rest." By the time Jonathan reached their side, Margaret had already placed the cup into Eleanor's trembling hands. He didn't notice the way Margaret's eyes hardened, didn't notice the tension in Eleanor's shoulders, didn't notice the way the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Eleanor forced a polite smile. She didn't want to worry him, didn't want to ruin the evening, didn't want to look weak, so she lifted the cup toward her lips. The first sip was warm, soft, almost soothing. Almost. But then a strange bitterness bloomed beneath the sweetness, a bitter taste that sunk into her tongue like a hidden blade. Her throat tightened, her stomach flipped, her fingers trembled around the porcelain. Margaret watched her without blinking, a stillness that didn't belong to a mother on her son's wedding night. It belonged to someone waiting, counting, measuring every swallow. Eleanor placed the cup down, her hand slick with cold sweat. A chill crawled through her veins, slow, deliberate, wrong. Jonathan touched her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Eleanor opened her mouth, but no sound came out. In the center of the ballroom, under the golden lights, surrounded by music and celebration, the first wave of poison began its work. No one noticed, except the one who wanted her dead. For next of this dark and unfolding tragedy, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. No one expected death at a celebration, but that night the Harrington mansion became a house of shadows, and the bride's last breath was closer than anyone realized. The candles flickered in the grand hall, their light dancing across the polished wooden floor. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and music floated through the air. The wedding feast looked perfect. Golden roasts and crystal goblets lined up like treasures. Eleanor smiled politely, though a faint unease tugged at her chest. Every glance at Margaret sent a shiver down her spine. Margaret moved among the guests with a calculated grace. Her smile was thin, almost brittle. She poured wine into Jonathan's glass first, watching him drink with satisfaction. Then she stepped closer to Eleanor, offering the same delicate goblet. Eleanor hesitated, just a moment, then raised it to her lips. A faint metallic taste lingered. She frowned, blaming it on nerves. The laughter grew louder, the musicians striking a faster tempo. No one noticed Margaret's eyes glinting from across the room. She whispered a soft chant under her breath, unnoticed. Her hands hovered over plates, touching what only she had prepared. A slow poison, bitter but nearly invisible, mixed into Eleanor's wine and food. Eleanor laughed politely at a joke Jonathan made. Her throat felt dry, her stomach uneasy. The room spun lightly, just enough to make her pause. Jonathan leaned close, concerned, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You feel all right?" he asked. I think so," Eleanor murmured, trying to steady herself. Margaret's smile widened imperceptibly. No one suspected a thing. The feast continued, guests raising toasts. Eleanor's hand shook, her vision blurred. The poison worked slowly, invisible, creeping through her system. She tried to ignore it, tried to enjoy the celebration, but the unease kept growing, tightening in her chest. Jonathan noticed it next, his brow furrowing. Eleanor set down her goblet, pressing her hand against her stomach. A cold sweat formed on her forehead. He grabbed her arm gently. "Eleanor, you're pale, you're burning up." Her lips trembled as she forced a small nod. Margaret passed by nearby, silent, watching, her eyes cold and calculating. The music and laughter became distant echoes to Eleanor. Her head felt heavy, her heart pounding unevenly. She wanted to call out, wanted someone to save her, but words failed her. Only the silent shadow of Margaret lingered at the edge of her vision. By the time the servants noticed, it was almost too late. Eleanor's body sagged slightly in her chair. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Gasps echoed around the hall. Jonathan's face drained of color. Margaret appeared at his side, faking concern, her hand lightly brushing his arm. The guests could only watch as the horror unfolded. No one knew what had been done. No one suspected Margaret yet. The night had turned from celebration to nightmare, and the tragedy was far from over. If you want to uncover what happens next in this chilling wedding story, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe for next. A single glance can change everything. One horrifying moment can shatter a lifetime. Jonathan was about to see the dark secret hiding behind his mother's smile. Jonathan held Eleanor in his arms, her body trembling. Her face was pale, lips quivering as she tried to speak. The guests crowded around, murmuring in confusion and fear. No one understood what had happened. No one suspected the truth. Margaret stood nearby, her expression perfectly calm. Her hand rested lightly on Jonathan's shoulder, reassuring, almost loving. Her eyes, however, betrayed her, cold, calculating, satisfied. She had watched her plan unfold without a hitch, but Jonathan's gaze began to shift. His eyes scanned her carefully. Something didn't feel right. He noticed the subtle things, the way her hand lingered near the wine bottle, the faint smirk she quickly hid, the way she avoided looking at Eleanor too long. His mind pieced it together. A dreadful realization settled in his chest. Jonathan pulled Margaret aside quietly, away from the chaos. "Mother, what did you do?" he whispered. Margaret's smile faltered for the tiniest fraction of a second. Then she replaced it with calm reassurance. "Jonathan, my son, I only did what was necessary," she said softly. Her words sounded sweet, but her eyes were empty. He felt a chill run down his spine. Meanwhile, Eleanor's body grew weaker. Her breaths came in shallow, shaky gasps. Jonathan turned back to her, panic rising in his chest. He could feel her slipping, feel the poison working. He clenched his fists, anger and terror mixing into something raw and powerful. He would not let this end like this. The guests began to murmur again, noticing the tension. Whispers filled the hall. Some blamed nerves, some blamed accident. No one suspected murder yet. Jonathan's mind raced. He had to act before it was too late. He grabbed the nearest servant, demanding help. The maid brought water. Someone else checked Eleanor's pulse. He refused to let her be moved from his side. And all the while, Margaret remained close, poised and graceful. Her plan almost perfect, almost flawless. But Jonathan would not be fooled. He confronted her quietly again, voice low but deadly serious. "This was no accident," he said. Margaret's eyes flickered. A shadow of doubt crossed her face, but she quickly recovered. "You don't understand, Jonathan," she said, her tone soft and persuasive. "You never will." Jonathan looked at his bride, fighting for her life. His mother had poisoned her, and the realization burned like fire. The wedding, the celebration, the happiness, it was all shattered. The mansion, once a place of joy, now felt like a tomb. Every smile was a lie, every gesture a trap. Jonathan knew the battle had just begun. He would uncover every secret, reveal every lie. He would not let Margaret's cruelty go unpunished. To see how the mother-in-law's dark motives are revealed and the story unfolds further, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe for next. Some secrets are buried so deep, they fester quietly, like poison in the blood. Margaret Harrington's truth was darker than anyone could imagine. Margaret stood by the grand fireplace, her hands folded neatly. Her face calm, her eyes cold as ice. Yet inside, a storm raged, one she had carefully hidden for years. Years of resentment, jealousy, and obsession. All focused on one thing, her son, Jonathan. She had raised him with iron precision. Every choice, every lesson, every expectation, all to ensure he remained under her control. She had watched him grow, watched him dream, watched him love, and hated every moment he turned to someone else. Eleanor had entered their lives like a ray of light, bright, kind, and completely unaware of the storm she had stepped into. Margaret had tolerated her at first, a polite smile here, a pointed remark there, but soon it became unbearable. The thought of sharing her son was unbearable. And so she planned, quietly, meticulously, every detail of the wedding, every dish at the feast, all prepared to ensure Eleanor would never live to enjoy her happiness. Every step of the night was designed to appear innocent, every action masked in the guise of love and care. Jonathan did not yet understand the depth of her hatred. He only knew something had gone terribly wrong. He had confronted her once, but Margaret's mask had not slipped, not yet. He had to see the proof. He had to uncover the full extent of her darkness. Margaret walked past the guests, offering smiles that hid the venom inside. She watched Jonathan tend to Eleanor, her mind calculating. She believed she could manipulate him, twist his grief into forgiveness, keep her secrets intact forever. But Jonathan's eyes had changed. He no longer saw a smiling mother. He saw a woman capable of unspeakable cruelty, a woman who would poison her own daughter-in-law to maintain control. He would not look away. He would not be fooled. In the kitchen, a servant whispered to Jonathan, "Sir, I found this hidden in the wine cellar. It's labeled for the feast." Jonathan's hands shook as he held the small vial. The truth burned in his chest. Every detail fell into place. Every doubt confirmed. Margaret's plan was as sinister as he had feared. Margaret noticed the sudden tension in Jonathan. She approached calmly, asking in her sweetest voice, "What is it, my son?" Jonathan turned to face her, holding the vial like evidence of a crime. Her smile faltered for the briefest second. A flicker of fear crossed her eyes. Then it vanished, replaced by practiced composure. The room felt colder, darker, as if the walls themselves sensed the revelation. The guests remained unaware, laughter still ringing faintly in the halls. But the battle had begun. The confrontation that could destroy the Harrington family and change everything forever. If you want to see the terrifying confrontation and the investigation that follows, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe for next. When lies crumble, truth strikes like lightning. And the Harrington mansion was about to witness a storm no one could escape. Jonathan stood in the grand hall, holding the small vial in his trembling hands. His eyes scanned the room, searching for answers, searching for the proof that would condemn Margaret. Eleanor leaned weakly against him, barely conscious, her breaths shallow. The guests murmured in confusion, unaware of the danger that had lurked among them. Margaret remained poised, her smile untouched, but a flicker of tension betrayed her. She moved closer to Jonathan, trying to maintain control of the moment. "I don't know what you think you found, Jonathan," she said softly, "but everything is perfectly normal here." Jonathan's voice was low, cold, and unrelenting. "Mother, I found this. You poisoned Eleanor. You planned this. Every detail." Margaret's hand tightened around the fabric of her dress, her composure faltering for just a heartbeat. Her mind raced, calculating, planning an escape from exposure. The guests began to notice the tension. Some stepped back, others whispered nervously. A servant whispered, "Sir, the wine cellar, the other bottles." Jonathan nodded grimly, knowing he held the key to revealing the full truth. He led the guests to the wine cellar. Rows of bottles glimmered in the flickering lantern light. And there, hidden behind the others, were small vials, labeled carefully, prepared for every dish. The realization struck the crowd like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the room, eyes widening in disbelief. Margaret's face paled for the first time in years. Her carefully constructed mask began to crack. Jonathan confronted her in front of the assembled guests. "You lied. You poisoned her. You tried to destroy her life." Her hands trembled slightly, then clenched into fists. She raised her chin, refusing to break. "I did what I had to do to protect my son. My actions were necessary." The guests whispered in shock. Some recoiled, others looked horrified. Eleanor's weak voice finally spoke. "Jonathan, she tried to kill me." He held her close, anger and fear boiling inside him. Margaret realized the walls of her empire were collapsing. The servants, once fearful, now stepped forward. Witnesses began recounting odd actions, suspicious behavior, small details that had gone unnoticed. The truth spread quickly. The mother-in-law's reign of control was over. Jonathan looked at her with grief and fury. "You will answer for this. No more lies, no more poison." Margaret's eyes darted around the hall. For the first time, fear replaced her cold confidence. The mansion, once a house of celebrations, now echoed with horror and betrayal. The night had turned from joy to tragedy. But justice had begun to find its way through the shadows. The Harrington family would never be the same, and the ghost of that poisoned wedding would linger forever. To witness the tragic ending and the final twist of this dark wedding tale, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe for next episode. Some weddings end in joy, some in sorrow, but this one ended in a darkness no one could escape. Eleanor lay weakly in Jonathan's arms. Her breaths were shallow, her body trembling. The poison had taken its toll, but she clung to life. Jonathan's heart pounded with a mix of fear, fury, and desperation. He refused to let her go. Margaret stood across the room, her composure shattered. The guests surrounded her, their eyes wide with horror. Whispers filled the hall like a storm. They had witnessed the truth, the cold, calculated cruelty of a mother-in-law who would kill for control. Jonathan's voice cut through the chaos. "You will never harm her again. Never." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands shook slightly as she realized her empire of fear was gone. Her son, once blindly obedient, now stood against her. The servants moved quietly, attending to Eleanor. Water, blankets, urgent care. Any attempt to counteract the poison. Jonathan refused to leave her side. He watched Margaret, his eyes never leaving hers. Every ounce of betrayal burned inside him. Margaret tried to speak, tried to manipulate the moment. "My son, you don't understand. I only did this to protect you." Jonathan shook his head, voice trembling with pain and rage. "No more lies, no more control. You chose this path." Suddenly, Eleanor coughed violently, spitting out a small amount of wine. The guests gasped, relief mixed with terror. Her strength was returning, slowly, painfully. Jonathan held her tighter, whispering comfort and love. Margaret's plan had almost succeeded, but Jonathan's determination had saved the bride. The law was called and evidence collected. The hidden vials, the poisoned feast, Margaret's careful preparations, all exposed for the town to see. Margaret's calm mask finally shattered. She was led away, defiant yet broken. Her power over the family destroyed. Eleanor leaned against Jonathan, weak but alive. Her eyes, filled with tears, met his. They had survived the night, the poison, the betrayal, yet the shadow of that dark wedding would linger forever. The mansion that had once symbolized celebration now stood as a monument to deceit and danger. Jonathan gazed at the remnants of the feast. The broken glasses, the half-eaten food, the flickering candlelight. He realized how close they had come to losing everything. He swore he would protect Eleanor for the rest of their lives, and that Margaret would never threaten them again. The town of Hartford whispered about the tragedy for years. The story of the wedding, the poison, the mother-in-law's cruelty. It became a warning for generations. A tale of love, betrayal, and survival. A wedding that promised happiness, but delivered horror instead.